millions around the world have been voluntarily leaving their jobs in droves. It's called the Great Resignation, and it's happening right now. It's happening because many are in search of more money, more flexibility, and more satisfaction. And even you might be feeling uneasy. You might be on the verge of joining the movement of quitting for better change.
Holy, what's up? No, everything's fine. Hey, listen, I quit.
And I get it. The idea of reclaiming control and taking ownership of your career right now has never been more appealing. But I want to first warn you, before you even think about handing in that resignation letter that you hastily typed, I strongly recommend that you first consider whether you're quitting for the right reasons or whether you're just bored. Is there a legitimate hunger for change and growth? Or is this just a knee-jerk reaction to burnout? Now, unless salaries have really increased in your job type, in which case definitely shop around and secure a role before you resign, you want to be sure that you're making the move for the right reasons. Yahoo Finance recently interviewed me about my thoughts on this topic, and I took them through these 5 red flags that signal it's time to look for a new job. Here they are. The first one is obvious: poor work-life balance. This is where your employer believes that you should be prioritizing work over everything else. And this is damaging over the long term, and it's what's been contributing to work exhaustion and leading to burnout. We all know what it's like when you're in an environment like that. It's horrible. You feel torn because you have to prioritize work over your relationships and over other things important to your well-being. It can impact your self-worth. It can create a sense of productivity guilt, where you feel guilty when you're not being productive or when you stop working, and you can't disconnect. Work is always on your mind. Now, while it's obvious that people work to get paid, many are realizing that there is more to life than overworking yourself to the bone, and employers need to understand and respect boundaries. So if you have sustained poor work-life balance, you might want to consider using some of your annual leave to give your mind time to settle and to gain clarity to think rationally about what the next best move is for you. You might even try to negotiate additional flexibility, where you can work remotely some days and try and regain control over your hours. And if the answer is a blunt no, then it's time to look somewhere where the answer is yes. The second red flag is chronic micromanagement.
Here's what's going to happen. I am going to have to fix you, manage you on a more personal scale, a more micro form of management. Jim, what is that called?
Microregiment?
Boom.
Anyone who has to work with a micromanager knows how stifling it feels. It's essentially a sign of an incompetent boss that doesn't trust your autonomy, even though you're competent and reliable. And it undermines your sense of self-efficacy, which then erodes your self-worth and it devalues your standing in the organization over time. You might start to become frustrated by the lack of freedom, becoming consumed by self-doubt, and no longer believing that you're capable of doing things on your own. If you're experiencing this, try to have an open conversation with the perpetrator. Raise the situation and your concerns and frame it from the perspective that it's hindering you from performing at your best. Because ultimately, your performance reflects on your boss or your manager, so that might catch their attention. You could say, "For me to be able to do my best work and perform at my peak, I need to feel that I'm trusted and given autonomy to do my work. I'm not seeing that level of trust and it's impacting my performance. What can we do about this?" Frame it as a collaborative question. Often those who micromanage do it because they're trying to satisfy their extreme need for control and certainty. They might have underlying feelings of inadequacy, and this manifests in wanting to take credit for the work of those in their team. So it is helpful to understand the underlying reasons that could be influencing their behavior, but of course, that doesn't excuse it. So if you've already raised it and nothing changes, which is more common than you'd think, this is a golden ticket to say sayonara. Red flag number 3 is no appreciation for your work and no opportunities for growth. Most humans are fundamentally driven to feel like they belong, that they're part of the group. And this drives a desire for validation and approval, which also manifests at work. Plenty of studies have proven that employees are often more motivated by recognition and appreciation than with pay rises. So being underappreciated and lacking opportunities for growth reflects a management problem, a symptom of poor leadership. And we know that most people leave organizations because of mediocre leaders. And it can be a really hard pill to swallow because the lack of fairness and justice can lead to hopelessness, which saps your motivation. This is often closely related to a lack of opportunity for growth or advancement. So if you've been stuck in this Groundhog Day existence, it's time to look for a place that appreciates you and actually supports your career development. Red flag number 4 is the integrity deficit. So if you're hearing, take breaks, go for a walk, invest in your wellness, but then when you're back on your desk after a 15-minute stroll, your inbox is full of, why can't we reach you? Where are you at? This is an example of a lack of integrity and the inability to genuinely uphold values. Many organizations claim to genuinely care about employee well-being, but when it comes to how they operate, it's all about squeezing the maximum out of their human capital. If you experience this disconnect between a company's outward values and their actions, you might experience something called cognitive dissonance, where you're told these lofty values that you really resonate with, but meanwhile the culture is at complete odds and conflicting with your values, resulting in an internal struggle about where you belong. I always encourage raising your concerns first, but if they're disregarded and the hypocrisy continues, it's time to jump ship. And red flag number 5, when it just doesn't feel right. If your intuition is persistently telling you that something is off, then something likely is. Don't ignore it. You've got to honor those feelings because that's your inner self trying to highlight some important information. So the right thing to do is to have an honest self-audit. Maybe you're not passionate about the work. Maybe the culture isn't the right fit. Maybe something else doesn't sit right. Maybe you don't understand the purpose or the bigger picture as to why you do what you do. There is no use showing up to work every day feeling anxious, miserable, or like you can't be your best. We spend most of our best years and waking hours at work, so you've got to make sure that it's an environment where you actually feel empowered. So there are 5 red flags to have on your radar. But what if you actually do enjoy your job, but you're feeling uneasy and you have itchy feet? Well, here's my advice. If you still enjoy your job, you could just be experiencing boredom, which happens when you're under-challenged intellectually or creatively. It can happen when you've been doing the same role for a prolonged period that you've become really competent at. It's just too easy. So don't immediately assume that itchy feet is your body's way of telling you that you need to quit and jump ship. The solution to boredom at work isn't always a new job. It could also be a byproduct of the intense uncertainty that we've all gone through and the changes in the working environment. Many have become emotionally numb. So if you still do enjoy your work, that's a really good sign. It might just be that you need to shake things up by adding a little bit of spice to your daily routine or picking up a new hobby. Or you can take this as an opportunity to speak up and ask for new opportunities to contribute at work or to take on more responsibility that could even lead to a promotion. Maybe you could mentor a junior colleague or get involved in an employee advocacy group. But if you still can't shake off the itch, then seriously consider seeking a new challenge elsewhere. I hope this episode was helpful by adding some clarity, or at least sparking some introspection about whether it's the right time for you to join the Great Resignation, or just add some spice at work. Either way, I wish you all the very best with your journey. I'm Sade Zarai. I'll see you next time.